Welcome students in this e-learning class. Today I shall be teaching you John Keats' poem To Autumn, and this lecture is primarily meant for semester 4 students of English program course. For your convenience and easy understanding, I have divided my lecture into 3 parts. On the first part, in this lecture I shall be discussing the context of the poem. I shall go through the poem briefly. I shall discuss the form and the structure and the content. In the next part, I shall be discussing the important themes and issues regarding this poem, the critical focus, and in the third part, in the last lecture, I shall be discussing various comments and critical observations made by eminent critics throughout centuries on this poem regarding Keats' Autumn. Now, John Keats was one of the most eminent romantic poets of English literature, and in my previous lectures I have discussed extensively on the background of English Romanticism. You see, many critics consider this poem To Autumn as the last poem written by John Keats, because Keats, who died on 23rd February in the year 1821, and this poem To Autumn was published in the year 1820, so just the previous year before Keats' death. And this poem is included in the volume of Keats' poetry that included Lamia, The Eve of St. Agnes, right? So notable other poems. And To Autumn is the final work in a group of poems known as the Keats 1819 Odes. So this poem is basically an ode which Keats had composed in the year 1819, subsequently published in the following year, which is 1820. So what happened after 1820? Why did not or why was not Keats able to write poems? Because you see, what you find in his biography, that he had some personal problems which left him little time to devote poetry in 1820. Right? And see, he was suffering from a multitude of financial troubles throughout the year, including concerns over his brother George, who emigrated to America and was in badly need of money. So, despite these distractions, on 19 September 1819, Keats found time to write To Autumn, and this poem marks the final moment of his poetic career. So, he was no longer able to afford or devote his time to the composition of poems, and he began working on more lucrative projects. And after 1820, Keats' health also began to decline, and his personal responsibilities also raised obstacles to continue his poetic efforts. So, one day, Keats was walking near the Winchester on an autumnal evening, and the work marks the end of his poetic career, as I have told you. A little over a year after the publication of To Autumn, Keats died in Rome. So, during the spring of 1819, Keats wrote many of his major odes. Keats was famous for, Ode to the Nightingale, his most famous poem. Apart from the Nightingale Ode, Keats had also written Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode on Indolence, Ode on Melancholy, Ode to Psyche, and many other. After the month of May, he began to pursue other forms of poetry, including the verse tragedy Otho the Great, in collaboration with his friend and roommate Charles Brown, the second half of Lamia, and a return to his unfinished epic Hyperion. So, on 19 September 1819, Keats was walking near Winchester along the river Itchen, right? In a letter to his friend John Hamilton Reynolds, written on 21st September, Keats described the impression the scene had made upon him and its influence in the composition of To Autumn. In that letter, he is writing, How beautiful the season is now, how fine the air, a temperate sharpness about it. I never liked stubble fields so much as now. Somehow a stubble plain looks warm. In the same way some pictures look warm, this struck me so much in my Sunday's work that I composed upon it. So, not everything on Keats' mind at the time was bright. The poet knew in September that he would have to finally abandon Hyperion, his unfinished epic. Thus, in the letter that he wrote to Reynolds, Keats had included a note saying that he had finally abandoned his long poem, writing the long poem Hyperion. And Keats did not send to Autumn to Reynolds, his friend, but did include the poem within a letter to Richard Woodhouse, his publisher and friend, and dated it on the same day. And it was this friend, Richard Woodhouse, who managed to finally include this poem in the Keats' Odes and publish it later. So this poem was revised and included in Keats' 1820 collection of poetry titled Lamia, Isabella, The Eve of Saint Agnes, and other poems. The publisher was Taylor and Hesse. They feared the kind of bad reviews that had plagued Keats' 1818 edition of Endymion. They were willing to publish the collection after the removal of any potentially controversial poems to ensure that there would be no poetically or politically motivated reviews that could give the volume a bad reputation. So this poem is about nature. And very significantly, Keats had focused the theme, the backdrop of this poem on the season of autumn, which comes after summer, right, and before winter. So the summer which we experience in India is very scorching, very fearsome. The summer in the West, the summer in England is not like the summer that we observe, that we feel in India. The summer is a time of rejoicing, and after summer comes autumn, very pleasant atmosphere, very soothing environment. And after autumn there is winter, which suggests death, because winter is very terrible in the West. It is very cold. It is not as pleasant that we witness in India, right? So autumn marks a declining phase, and there is a autobiographical essence in the poem, because during 1820 Keats' health was rapidly declining, right? So after winter, there comes spring, as P.B. Shelley had suggested. Right? So spring marks a regeneration which finds a culmination in the season of summer. But the growth that people experience in summer, the flourishing, marks a declining phase, right? A decrease in the season of autumn, which finally ends or terminates in winter. Now, if I go through the poem, see how the poem is structured. This poem has 3 stanzas consisting of 11 lines each, and describing a progression through the season, from the late maturation of the crops to the harvest and to the last days of autumn when winter is nearing. The imagery is richly achieved through the personification of autumn and the description of this bounty, its sights and sounds. It has parallels in the work of English landscape artist, with Keats himself describing the fields of stubble that he saw on his walk, conveying a warmth of some pictures, right? Now, season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend and maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the most cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, To swell the gourd and plump the hazel cells with a sweet kernel to set budding more, and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clammy cells. So Keats' speaker on the first stanza, he addresses the season autumn. He describes its abundance and its intimacy with the sun, with whom autumn ripens fruits and causes the late flowers to bloom. The second stanza goes like this: Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spears the next swath and all its twined flowers, and sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy leaden head across a brook, or by a cedar breast with patient look thou watchest the lays oozing hours by hours. So, in the second stanza, the speaker describes the figure of autumn as a female goddess who often seen sitting on the granary floor. Her hair is soft lifted by the wind, and she is often seen sleeping in the fields or watching a cedar press squeezing the juice from apples. Right. So this is a description of a personified vision of autumn. In the last stanza, where are the songs of spring? Where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too. While bared clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue. Then in a wailful choir the small gnats moan among the river's shallows, borne aloft, or sinking as the light wind leaves or dies, and full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. Hedge crickets sing now with treble soft, the red-breast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. So in the third stanza, in the final stanza, the speaker tells that autumn not to wonder where the songs of springs have gone, but instead to listen to her own music. At twilight, the small gnats hum among the river swallows, or willow trees lifted and dropped by the winds, and full-grown lambs bleat from the hills, crickets sing, robins whistle from the garden, and swallows gathering for their coming migration sing from the skies. So that winter is now approaching. You see the form, the structure of the poem is similar to Ode on Melancholy or Ode to Autumn. See, it is written, this poem, in a three-stanza structure with a variable rhyme scheme. Each stanza, as I have told, is 11 lines, consists of 11 lines. And the first stanza is arranged in the C, D, E, D, C, C pattern, while the second and the third stanzas are arranged in C, D, E, D, 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 E pattern. The first part of each stanza follows an ABAB rhyme scheme, the first line rhyming with the third, and the second line rhyming with the fourth. Thematically, the first part of each stanza serves to define the subject of the stanza, and the second part offers room for musing, development, and speculation on the subject. And many critics consider that this thematic structuring of this poem is very general and conventional in its approach. Thank you, students. In my next lecture, I shall be discussing the themes and issues.